Hey, g'day everybody, it's Matt here from Matt Carve. So today we're going to carve this profile of this Viking from this drawing that I drew. And there's a couple of problems with profile kind of carvings that you got to kind of be aware of before you start. And well, there's two that I kind of came across. Okay, so the first problem I kind of want to show you, or well, just talk about actually, is the fact that you've probably carved a lot of these kind of characters like face-on kind of wood spirits, and now you've got to carve something from the side. So essentially it's completely different, but your mind's going to be kind of telling you to sort of, you know, try and carve it from the front, but you're going to carve it from the side. So what a good thing to do is to actually use one of your carvings and just turn it sideways and sort of see how you're going to carve things. So essentially that's kind of like the profile there. So what we got to do is that nose has got to be like taken all the way back and all of this kind of stuff, and the eye is going to be sort of like going like that. So it's quite difficult to sort of envision this. So that kind of leads us on to the second problem, is where do you actually start? You know, where do you start when you're carving something like this? And so what I will look at is maybe big areas that are quite simple. I wouldn't start with the nose. I'd sort of want to get sort of like the big areas done. So we're looking at the kind of the helmet and the shield. So with the helmet, what we kind of want to do is we want to figure out what the highest point is, and with the shield also the highest point is actually going to be this point, because it's going to be going backwards into the wood like that, sort of like on an angle, and so it might not actually look like this when it's finished. So what we can sort of like look on this guy here with the helmet, so that's going to kind of be the highest point. And then the cheek's going to be the highest point. And I'm using a Dremel cutter burr there, but you could also use sort of like any kind of burr that would remove a lot of wood. You could use the Kutzall flame burr if you wanted to, but this one's a little bit easier to get those kind of flatter planes with, because it's got a flat surface. So we're going to take that shield back into the wood, but I've also decided I am going to remove most of the wood, well, on that part of the carving, sort of like to the right of the helmet, and then we will shape the helmet out and shape the face out.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree.
And if you got a bandsaw, what you could do is what I just did then, is cut a rectangle out of the wood, and then you've only got a little bit to remove with a burr. And what I'm going to use today is I'm going to use the saber tooth, kind of like a very coarse burr, which I showed in that video a little while ago. It is great for taking away a lot of wood, just like the Kutzall Extreme burr. But if you want to see the comparison between the two, check out that video up in the right hand corner. So yeah, look at it, it is carving up that wood. And like I said before, you can actually carve those flat surfaces with the flame burr. That is the Kutzall flame burr there. So I tend to sort of like keep it moving fast, so it just sort of like doesn't dig in, and don't press it too hard either. Sort of, you're sort of like removing little bits to make a kind of flat area. Okay, so now I'm just penciling in sort of where the highest point is on the helmet. Well, round about there. And I am going to take the sort of round off the helmet there. I have got a new burr. I'm not really too sure about this one. It is actually for cutting tiles, believe it or not. But I thought I'd give it a go because I had a little bit of money from gift cards on Amazon. So I just sort of like buy weird kind of burrs to try them out and see if they work. So it's quite cool because there's a really big flat area that's capable of carving. Whether it dulls very fast, I don't know, I can't really tell you. This is really hard wood, but it seems to be removing the wood pretty well. But I'm not going to recommend this burr because, well, I just haven't used it for long enough to sort of recommend it. So, but I will do a review on it in the future. But it's working okay at the moment, so we're just sort of like rounding off that helmet. So we've sort of got, what we'll do is we'll round off the helmet, and then we can sort of like tell how the face is going to work in relation to that helmet and in relation to the shield at the front as well. So sort of like the next part after this, we're going to look at the nose and just sort of figure out how to do that. And when it comes to carving the nose, grab that wood spirit that you've got and sort of relate it to your carving there. So what we need to do is we need to take that nose back, and what I'm using is the Cutzel fine taper burr because I want a lot of control here, and I want sort of that fine tip so I can sort of use it in really tight kind of areas and just take little bits off at a time. Yeah, so it's quite strange, isn't it? It's sort of like you've always done those front-on carvings and now you're going to the side and things are sort of like not quite working out. I sort of like noticed the helmet doesn't have that sort of like bit going over the nose because I drew it in the wrong place. And because it's a three-dimensional carvings, your 2D drawing isn't going to quite work out, but you've sort of got to just adapt as you go along and sort of work things out. So it looks terrible at the moment, I know, and that's just the way carving is, you know. You go through a period where you're thinking, oh, this is not going to happen, but you just got to have faith that it's gonna all come together once you start putting in those smaller details like the nostril and the cheekbone and the beard and all of that kind of stuff. I've just put in a little line there where I think the eye is going to be. And that curve there, that is the usual curve that comes under the eye. And I want to have a kind of an eyebrow is there too. So I might take that helmet up a little bit. Haven't quite worked out where that eye is going to go. You kind of have to use your instincts a lot because when you're transferring a drawing, which is two-dimensional, into a carving that is three-dimensional, it's not going to be exact. So once you start putting it into 3D, things are going to move around. And just keep on looking at that wood spirit that you've already carved on the side so you can sort of like work out where things go and all of that kind of stuff. I had a lot of problems. Well, I didn't have a lot of problems, but I was just sort of like really concentrating on that wood spirit to try and figure out how the nostril relates to the nose and the eyebrow and the eye coming up to the cheek and all of that kind of stuff, that cheekbone which is kind of like the highest point. So everything's starting to take a little bit more shape here. You can sort of see the eye going in there. I'm just going to freeze it here and I'm just going to show you. There's the eyebrow up the top, that's looking pretty good. The cheekbone, which is the highest point. The nostril that you can't really see. Now what I'll do with the nostril is I will just leave it kind of there, and then I will sort of shape it out and maybe make it a little bit smaller as well. And here we go, we're putting in the eye details here, and I'm just going to like put in a little pupil there, sort of like looking forward. So it's really actually going to like be really correct in the middle of the eye, but it's almost going to be in the corner of the eye. But it looks like when you're looking at it from the front that the Viking is looking forward. So you have to sort of like make these decisions based on what you think and not what reality is. Sort of like that eyeball really does need to be at the front, so you can sort of see the eyebrow there and the cheekbone, and the nostril has all taken shape, and the part between the mustache and the cheek, I've kind of rounded that off so that kind of makes the cheek stick out a little bit more, And now we're going to move on to the details of the hair and just sort of like fining things up now. Okay, because we're carving on a flat plane with the hair, I want to sort of like shape it first. So I've used that big cut saw kind of sphere burr just to give the hair a little bit of shape before I put the definition in, as otherwise the hair will just appear quite flat. So I'm just sort of like making lines, sort of like contours before I put the fine details in. Usually what I'll do on the face is I'll put some fine lines in for the hair coming off the face, and then I will make it a little bit bigger as I go out. And so I sort of like just use a bigger inverted cone burr. But what I found with the cone burr, because this wood is a little bit harder than usual, sort of like basswood, or what I often carve in is macrocarpa, it was pretty hard to use those diamond burrs, so I found this quite handy. It's just a small little cutter burr. I don't have a link for this, sorry, but you know, any kind of cutter burr with a sharp edge on it will work. But I went back to those little inverted cones for some detailing there. And if you have found this video useful, if you could hit that like button, that would be awesome. Hey, we're coming up to the end. Thank you for watching. It's much appreciated. Any comments are always really nice to read. And we're going to finish it off with a dark mahogany wax, and I went back and I carved out a little bit of the eye pupil as well. And that's it finished.